TV, episode number 29, and I am excited to have you here today. We're diving into a big topic. It's why we gain weight. And I wanted to get into this because we have, we're constantly presented with this question, how do I lose weight? And, there's lots of strategies out there, many of which are, I would argue are really unsuccessful. Probably most of you, I think it's like over 90% of people that try a diet to lose weight fail. And so, but nonetheless, we have this massive problem in our society of overweight and obesity and individuals who are overweight. In fact, it's over 50% of our population now that's overweight or obese. It's a massive problem. And so I thought, why not dive into this question? Because before we can answer, I think truthfully, before we can answer how do we lose weight, I think it's really important that we understand how do we gain weight in the first place. Okay? And I'll be honest, I didn't actually know. I wasn't that clear on it. So I spent the last few weeks really diving into this topic. And again, I'll be honest, I've been startled with some of the information I've been presented with, and it's really changed the way that I've thought about the concept of weight gain. And so I thought, let's share it with you. And it's such a big topic that I'm going to break it down into 3 different videos. So the next 3 videos are going to be based around kind of diving into what are the main processes involved in weight gain. And I thought, if you understand that, then it's probably going to be easier for you to reverse engineer that, so that if weight loss is a goal for you, you're going to be much more successful at that, losing weight and doing it long term. Okay. And so another thing I found out that I thought was just staggering, it kind of really brings home the real critical issue here. For the first time ever, our species is actually, so of all humans around the world, for the first time ever, there are more individuals who are obese than there are undernourished. Okay, so just think about that for a second. For the entire history of the human race, the problem has been largely finding enough food. Okay, so being undernourished, finding enough fuel to sustain, to survive. And now, just recently over the last 100 years, we've had this massive improvement in the distribution and production of food, which is awesome. And now we have this abundance of fuel for us. That's a great thing, but it comes with this consequence of now the issue of overconsumption. And so that's where we're going to start with today, is this whole concept of overeating. And I think it gets pinned on people that maybe do struggle with their weight. And maybe you can relate to this, is that it oftentimes just gets boiled down to you lack willpower, right? You're lazy. You just don't have the fortitude to withstand the pressures of eating, or the desire to eat that extra chocolate bar, the delicious looking muffin, and so that would be really like a psychological issue. But really, when it comes down to it, we need to think about this in the context of our evolution. And I think this is actually, just generally, this is a great place to start when it comes to these massive health problems, is to just take a bit more of a evolutionary or Paleolithic approach or view, and look at it first from that filter, because it often can add some insights, and certainly in this case it does. So let's go back, let's think 20,000 years ago, when our main imperatives was to survive. That was really, the goal of any individual human, was just to survive long enough to procreate, right? To have children, raise them up so that they're old enough so that they can procreate. And so to do that, we needed to find food and shelter. That's pretty much the 2 main imperatives: food, shelter, procreation. So finding food, that was actually, we would likely have just woken up every day, and the main goal was to find food for that day. Okay, and so we developed some really interesting techniques to determine, there's like 2 main concepts I want to talk about here. One is this: how do we determine if food is safe? And so this is where the concept of like palatability really originates from. So that our ability to taste foods, that came from this need to determine if food was safe or unsafe. And largely the unsafe foods that were around us were things like, we can think of like bad meat would be one thing, but really by and large it's thought that it was mainly came out of plants. So because plants their only way of protecting themselves is often to have some sort of poisonous component. And so we developed the capacity to be able to taste foods and determine, okay, is this potentially unsafe? Should I not eat it, or is it okay and I can consume it? And so that's actually where a lot of it, like our ability to taste and the concept of taste actually comes from. And so let's say we found some plants that looked like they were, they looked like they were edible, and then we'd eat them, and then, there's no ramifications. The taste profile was such that we were, told our brain like, yeah, this is safe. The next imperative, and really the next concept, was to eat it as much as we could, because we never knew when we were going to come across another fuel source. Okay, so the palatability of food and the ability to consume it and overconsume, those are like two main things that have stuck with us, and they're really hardwired into the brain. So that when you're presented with, say, a plate of chocolate chip cookies, and we already know when we see them, we already know that they taste delicious. So there's all these unconscious signals going on in the brain that's saying highly palatable, therefore eat as much as you can. Okay, that's really, if we were to just like really boil it down, there's these dominant unconscious thoughts going through. And it all is rooted in that history where we spent probably 99% of our history was based around those imperatives of finding food that was safe enough to eat and then eating as much of it as possible. And so, in the modern day, that does present us with a major challenge, right? Is that we are, if we're unaware of that, that means that we're going to be predisposed to just overconsuming, just eating as much as we can. We see food and we eat it. And so this is I think the reason why I wanted to start with this concept is that now that you know that, you can make better choices, right? Because you can say that, okay, I know that the reason why I'm craving that chocolate chip cookie that's on the plate sitting in front of me is because my brain is really hardwired to suggest that I should eat it. Knowing that, you can actually make a conscious choice to say, you know what, I know that it's not good for me, and it's not going to serve me both in the short or long term, and so therefore I'm going to say no. Okay, I'm not going to eat it. Okay, if you didn't know that, then perhaps you really do have to rely on this, this kind of fortitude or willpower. So that's why I wanted to start with that, and there's actually a few other lessons that we can learn from just looking at it through an evolutionary lens, and I'm going to dive into that over the next couple of shows. Next week, I wanted to really dive into this whole idea of calories. This is a concept that we've just developed over the last 40 or 50 years, and I think there's a lot of really destructive elements and a lot of really counterproductive things that come from this whole concept of a calorie. So that's what we're going to get into next week, and we're going to continue to delve into why it is that we gain weight. And with that knowledge, you're going to be able to reverse engineer and figure out what's the safest and healthiest way to lose weight and keep it off for the long term. Okay, so in the description above, you're going to see a link, and in that, if you follow that link, you can actually skip ahead a few episodes, because the final episode, I'm actually going to get into some strategies and solutions, some ways that you can start, some things that you can start to put into practice to help lose weight if that's a goal for you. Or perhaps someone around you. And so if you want to get a head start, then you can click that link, follow through, and download our Eat by Design Quick Start Guide. And in there, I really just kind of boiled Eat by Design down into like the 5 most important steps. Okay, these are easy things that you can put into practice starting tomorrow. And I really think there's a ton of value in there. So if you like what you're hearing, come back next week, watch the show, and also download the guide, and that'll give you a great starting point. All right, until next week, have a good weekend.